In this video, I'm going to talk about all the new Kill Team news and how it might relate to you. So I'm filming this on the 5th of July, Thursday. It'll go up tomorrow, Friday, the 6th of July, just like the videos do every Friday here at Tabletop Minions. A little quick plug, even though you're already watching the video. Anyway, my point is, today I got up and I had breakfast and did some stuff. I had the day off from work because of the 4th of July, and Games Workshop dropped a huge knowledge bomb on all of us, if you've been paying attention to the Warhammer community website, and announced, they've already announced Kill Team. We knew it was coming. They announced it back in the beginning of the year, but they really dropped the knowledge on us today. So a little bit of history. Kill Team has been a concept that's been in Warhammer 40,000 for a long time. I've always been a big fan of Kill Team. I've done videos about it before. Pachow. And in the past, the way it always worked was thusly. You already had the big, thick 40K rulebook for whatever edition it was. You already had a codex or codices, depending on how many different armies you played. And then you went out and you spent a relatively minimal amount of money, $15 or something like that, for a book that was called Kill Team. And it required you had to have you had to have the rules, you had to have a codex, and then it just gave you kind of a framework, parameters on how to play basically a skirmish version of the big army game that we know as Warhammer 40,000, aka 40K. The last time that they did this was in 7th edition. They released a book which you could buy digitally, or you could buy it in a box set that came with a bunch of Space Marines and a bunch of Tau. And then you could, but it also came, I think if I remember correctly, it also came with a little version of the 40K book. But if you wanted to play with other armies, you could, but you had to follow the rules that were in the Kill Team book, whether you bought it digitally or a paper version. And it's always been that way. It's always been something where you already have had to have made the investment of getting the rules and the codex and all that kind of stuff. And then here's another way you can play with the toys that you've already bought. This new version of Kill Team is a totally different thing. So when they first announced Kill Team back in the earlier part of 2018, everyone was like, oh great, they're going to make Kill Team for 8th edition. That's great. We're all looking forward to it. We like Kill Team. That's fun. And then they came out and said, actually, no, it's not for 8th edition. It's its own thing. It's its own standalone. Which everybody kind of went, wait, what? Why did you, huh? Because they had just released in 2017 Shadow War Armageddon, which was a great little game system. And it had a book, it had its own rules, everything was in there. It was using kind of like the 2nd edition, a lighter version of the 2nd edition 40K rules, which was basically Necromunda. So people who knew about the original Necromunda back in the mid-90s looked at this and were like, hey, cool, this is basically Necromunda, we can start playing that. People who liked Necromunda for the gangers were kind of like, well, this is a bummer because it doesn't have that. So it kind of goes back and forth. But it was a game system in and of itself, all in a little box. And by a little box, I mean a humongous box, actually, and only if you were lucky enough to actually get one of the boxes. When Shadow War was originally launched, it came with really cool terrain that you can now buy separately. But the original box was a nice, really inexpensive set, and it came with Space Marine Scouts, orcs, a ton of terrain, instructions, and some tokens and junk like that. And then you could play directly out of the box that way. That was a limited edition box, and then after that, they just started selling the manual, the Shadow War Armageddon manual, separately. And in that manual, it had rules and stats for a bunch of different armies. So you didn't have to buy a codex for an army that you wanted to play in Shadow War. You just used what was in the book. They were limited, but you got to use a bunch of different stuff, from Sisters of Battle to Inquisition to Grey Knights to Eldar to Orcs to everything you can, nearly everything you can think of within the 40K kind of storyline. It was a neat game. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed playing the small skirmish. It was a little different than I was used to because it was using such an older version of the rule set. You had sustained fire dice, you had weapons malfunctions, you had a lot of things that were standard in 2nd edition, but for a person who basically got in and started playing heavy into 5th and 6th and 7th, these things didn't come across as familiar to me. But, you kind of learn with what you got, and it was all self-contained in the book, and that was great. And then they announced Necromunda, and everyone went, wait, what? So then the Necromunda, which was another box thing that was and it came with some terrain, but not tall terrain too much, and there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, and a lot of people were kind of confused about those two things. So when they announced Kill Team in the beginning of 2018 and said, oh, by the way, it's not just an add-on to 8th edition 40K, it's its own thing, there were a lot of heads that were scratched, including this big one right here. But now, after today's announcements on the Warhammer community website, and I'm going to post that article, it's in the description below, there's a lot of information that's now explained. We're doing the same type of thing that we're doing with Shadow Warmageddon. We're working with a book, a single book. So the rules are in there, all the army lists and all the stuff that you need, which would basically be the codex books that you would normally have, all of that stuff is in this this Kill Team book. So every army that you're going to want to play, for the most part, there's a couple that aren't in there yet, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But all of that stuff's in there. The rules are in there. And for those of you who are like, well, yeah, but why? They already have 8th edition. Why wouldn't they just use 8th edition? Well, they said they didn't, but they kind of did. At least that's what they're saying in the article. They're saying that if you are familiar with 8th edition, there are a lot of things that will be familiar to you in this rule set. So we have to assume that maybe it's not going to be using like the same type of rules that, say, Shadow War did with suppression, not suppression dice, the sustained fire dice, and maybe there won't be the malfunction-y kind of weapon malfunctions and things like that you had in the Shadow War book. Maybe it will basically just be like straight up 8th edition. But they have said in this article that there are definite changes. There are definite things that will not be like 8th edition. One of the things they talk about is alternating activations, which makes this guy here very excited, because that was the one thing that I really wanted from 8th edition 40K was alternating activations. I still am not a huge fan of I get to go first, let's say, because I won initiative, so I do all my stuff, and then it's your turn, and then you do all your stuff. So we'll have to see what the activating, activations are going to be like. Is it going to be like I activate this guy and do movement, and then shooting, and then combat, and then, battle shock or whatever, and then you do a guy? Or does it go phase by phase? Or does it do like a mixture or a hybrid? But they talk about in this article about how this is a thing that you can look for, but the rules will still seem like 8th edition to some degree to a person who has played 8th edition before. The thing is that this game is really aimed a little bit more towards probably the people who haven't played 8th edition before. From what they show in the article, there's also going to be open play, narrative play, and matched play, much like there is now in 40K, much like there was in Age of Sigmar. That seems to be kind of a standard thing that they're doing now. So that whole information system is kind of moving forward now into Kill Team, which I think is very smart, because you've got people who like to play very different ways, and so why not just give them the options to do so? The thing that's going to be interesting, I think, is because of the narrative play, that very frequently also gets more into campaign play, although you can play campaign play in any of the 3 modes. When you do that, you will be able to kind of level up your people in the army. You'll be able to give them better skills, the specialists. The specialists from the old Kill Team are returning in this new Kill Team. This new Kill Team, understand, is not just Shadow Warmageddon with a new box. It is a newer thing from what these instructions are saying. They're saying that you have the ability to level up your people. In Shadow War, it was more about getting more points and being able to add more people and Prometheum caches and things like that. I don't know if that's going on in this, but from what they say in the instructions, there are levels to your specialist, your gunner, your medic, your leader, or whatever, which as they kind of ramp up, they get better and better abilities, basically. And so that's kind of a fun thing to be able to do if you want to go down that road and do a campaign, whether it be narrative or open or matched or whatever. The ability to do that, I think, is very interesting. And I think that they're seeming, at least from the way it's written, it seems as if they're also trying to aim towards the RPG crowd just a little bit, because they're talking about how you can have different backgrounds for your groups, your kill teams and things like that, which I don't know if there'll be something attached to those backgrounds, like if you get a certain background, you get a certain bonus in-game, or if it's just straight fluff. If it's just straight fluff, that's kind of an interesting thing, because I've not seen that kind of stuff come from Games Workshop in 40K, at least. I mean, obviously there's fluff in 40K, but having it be part of the creation of your people is a little different than I'm at least used to with stuff out of 40K. They also talked about the terrain that's coming in this new box, and it will also be available as a separate kit as well. It looks amazing. It's like, I really like the stuff that came with Shadow War, and I really like the look of this stuff, even though it's very different. It's much more building-like and less industrial machinery and piping and that kind of stuff and catwalks, but it's still got some definite height to it. It's very modular, and it looks like they're going to be putting that stuff out in separate kits as well. And from what they said in the article, and also from some stuff that I've seen on Facebook since the article's come out, it's going to be a very different thing than Shadow War Armageddon was. When Shadow War Armageddon came out, they released the box set, which was a great deal. And it was also, what nobody understood, was in limited quantity. So when that box was released, if you didn't snap it up from your local shop right away, it was gone. And so I saw a comment on one of their Facebook pages today, someone saying, hey, so is this going to be like the release with Shadow War where those boxes immediately disappeared? And they said, we will be selling the book separately, we'll be selling the terrain separately, but we are also going to be selling this box. This will be a permanent item that we're going to have in stock. So it's not going to be a limited edition box that you need to grab right away. It's something that's going to be out there for a while. But again, if you want to just buy the instruction booklet because you've already got a bunch of figures and you want to use them in your kill team, you can do that. You already have enough terrain, great. Maybe you want to buy the terrain in the book, but you don't need the other stuff in there, or maybe you just want to buy the book or just the terrain. Well, if you buy just the terrain, you'd be using it for some other game, obviously, because you're going to at least need the book to play kill team. You can probably tell I'm kind of excited about this. I think it's going to be really fun. And they sound like they'll be supporting it for a long time. They've already announced that there will be new tile sets for the game. In the article, they talk about how it's played on like a 22 by 30 board, but I don't know if you can only play it on the 22 by 30 board or if you could expand and go bigger. I don't see any reason why you couldn't, but they kind of focus on that 22 by 30 board. I think there's something very smart about that because that board will fit on a normal conference-style table, which if you go to nearly any game store, at least in America, that's the table that like Magic cards are played on. So almost every shop has got a bunch of tables like that size, but they don't always have a lot of tables that are big enough for a 4x6 or even a 3 foot by 3 foot board. So if that's the case, and they've decided that they want this to be able to be something that can be played on a conference table, that's very smart. If you can expand it out and play it on something bigger, all the better. But I think that's a very smart thing on their part, and they're going to be releasing different looking tiles that are basically like, kind of like Shadespire a little bit, those types of tiles, to be used in the game along with the terrain and all that kind of stuff. But you can probably play on whatever surface you want. And back around Adepticon time, they also announced another skirmish game at the time, which they called Rogue Trader, which had very different models, things that we have not seen before. The thing about the models that are going to be coming in the box set for Kill Team is it looks like it's going to be Genestealer Cult guys and some Adeptus Mechanicus guys, probably Vanguards or Rangers or whatever. And so that's cool. They're not just saying, hey, look, here's some more Space Marines, but they're just regular units that you could be buying now that have been out for a number of years. The Rogue Trader stuff that they showed off, those are sculpts that I certainly have never seen before. And originally I was like, wow, they're coming out with another skirmish game? But now the announcements that you're starting to see coming out are talking about how that Rogue Trader is actually going to be an add-on for Kill Team coming out towards the end of 2018, which means it looks like it's going to be 2 complete new forces, and it looks like probably a new board to play on, which I assume would actually be a Rogue Trader spaceship, kind of the outline shape of playing on, between bulkheads or whatever. So it's cool that they're going to be doing that, adding new stuff. I don't know how many other types of models they'll be adding for that system, but we'll have to see. The whole thing, I think, is very exciting. Like I've said, I love skirmish gaming. I don't dislike wargaming, I really don't, but a lot of times skirmish gaming can go quicker. I can pick and choose a lot more. I've talked about the buffet kind of aspect of where I can have a couple of orcs, or maybe, well, more than a couple, probably let's say 5-10. I can have just some Grey Knights, I'm never going to build an entire army of Grey Knights, but I'd love to paint 5, that kind of stuff. That's one of the benefits that a game like this can really help you with. It can really help you to be able to pick and choose, and as a painter, as a hobby guy, I really enjoy that. For the people out there who are into the competitive stuff, I think that they said that there was going to be probably some competitive, events, organized play, as they like to call it, related to Kill Team. So that's good news. We might see, depending on when it comes out, and they have said July of 2018, so I am assuming by at least the end of the month at the latest, you might start seeing tournaments and things like that as soon as maybe even Nova Open over in the DC area at the end of August. Could happen. So I think that with the success of Shadespire and how well that's done for Games Workshop, this is going to just, and then previous to that, 8th edition release, and previous to that, Age of Sigmar, and it just seems like, I don't know how they can be stopped. I mean, not that they should, obviously, but they just seem to be just rolling along and doing so well and not making a ton of missteps. I've been really impressed with all this stuff, and I'm really impressed with the stuff that I'm seeing from this article about Kill Team, and I hope to see some more before the end of July.